Hi, a pleasant good evening to everyone, or I should say good day. And what we are going to do is take a look at factors limiting upper cell size. So let me just put it on nice and big so that we all can see, right? So of course we will have learning outcomes for today's exercise, right? So at the end of this session, students should be able to calculate surface area to volume ratio in cuboid cells. You should be able to explain what happens as surface area to volume ratio decreases in cells. You should also be able to discuss the consequences of low surface area to volume ratio. And you should also be able to discuss the various mechanisms cells have evolved to overcome low surface area to volume ratio. So let's start off with a nice little introduction. What do you think would happen as cells grow? Not only do they demand more resources, as we can see here, our cell needs more food and more energy, but what we also see is that their surface area and volumes also increase. So the surface area, of course, will be their plasma membranes or cell membranes, this part on the outside here. So as the cell gets bigger, not only does their surface area increase, but also their volumes, the amount of mass or stuff on the inside of cells, right? So what we have here, let's just see what happens as cells get bigger by doing a bit of a calculation, right? So recall the surface area of a cube is the length by breadth by the number of sides. So here we have 4 cubes of increasing size, right? So each size here, the length, the breadth, and the width of each of these of this first cube here is 2 micrometers. This one here is 4 micrometers. This one here, which is bigger, is 6 micrometers. And this one here is 8 micrometers. So let's calculate the surface area of each one of these cubes. So what we see here, the surface area, of course, is 2 by 2, the length by the breadth, by the number of sides. Cubes have 6 sides. So what we realize is that the surface area of this small cube here is 24 micrometers. When we take a look at its volume, the volume, of course, it's a cube, so it's length by breadth by height, which in this case will be 2 by 2 by 2, which gives us 8. And when we compare, or I should say, put the surface area over the volume, we get this ratio, or we get this division factor. So when we put 24 over 8, the surface area to volume ratio is 3. Meaning that the surface area is essentially 3 times as large as the volume. So there's a lot more surface area exposed to the environment than there is volume on the inside. And of course, for cells, that's a great thing, right? But let's take a look at what happens when we increase this to 4, 6, and 8 micrometers. What we realize is that the surface area does increase. So here, our surface area, which will be 4 by 4 by 6, gives us 96. Here it will be 6 by 6 by 6, which gives us 216. And here it will be 8 by 8 by 6, which gives us 384. And when we look at the volumes, we also see that the volumes increase. But what it is that we notice is that the surface area increases. However, the volume increases much faster than the surface area. As a result, what we see when we compare the surface area to volume ratio is that we see a gradual decrease in surface area to volume ratio as cells get bigger. So as cells get bigger, what we saw is that the cell's surface area, the cell's volume, my mistake, grows faster than its surface area. And the surface area to volume ratio decreases. But this, however, has consequences for a growing cell. So there are consequences of low surface area to volume ratio for cells. And of course, one of the biggest consequences of low surface area to volume ratio is slower diffusion rates. Slower diffusion rates mean that diffusion is less efficient in cells as cells increase the distance for molecules to travel, and this can slow down metabolic processes, right? So as cells essentially get bigger, diffusion becomes less efficient. What we also see as well is that there is inefficient nutrient uptake and waste removal. So many cells require nutrients such as oxygen and glucose, But as they become bigger, the efficiency of diffusion slows down. So cells struggle to efficiently take in necessary nutrients and expel wastes like urea and carbon dioxide. So this can lead to a buildup of waste within the cell and a shortage of materials, and this can impair cellular function. Right? There are also more consequences like decreased communication. So what happens as cells get bigger is that they have a smaller surface area and a much larger volume to deal with. And on the surface of cells, you have these proteins here called receptors. And as cells get bigger, you have fewer receptors on the surface area because the surface area is smaller for there to be interaction with other cells. And this could, of course, affect communication between cells. So with a smaller surface area as cells get larger, there are fewer receptors available to detect these signals or to detect signals, which can limit a cell's ability to respond. This can hinder the cell's ability to change or adapt, and this can make them less resilient. Also, what can happen is that you can have decreased metabolic activity. Cells need oxygen, and this oxygen must get to the mitochondria within its cells. So if it is this cell was much larger, the rate of diffusion of oxygen into the cell would be slower because it will have a longer distance to get from the outside to the mitochondria. And this can take a metabolic toll on cells. So this can lead to things like lower energy production because cells need oxygen to get to produce ATP, and this can slow the metabolic rate of cells, affecting cells' growth, repair, and overall function. Right? So, of course, cells have evolved a variety of solutions to deal with low surface area to volume ratio as they get larger. Some of these include the evolution of microvilli. Microvilli are finger-like extensions of the cell membrane. And what these finger-like extensions do is that these invaginations or finger-like extensions, they increase or add more plasma membrane, and as such, it increases the surface area of the plasma membrane. So what you will see happening, these finger-like extensions increase the surface area, and which in turn increases the surface area to volume ratio. Cells have also evolved something called compartmentalization, which is the having membranes on the inside of cells. And these membranes have very, very specialized functions. So not only does compartmentalization add more cell membrane on the inside of the cell. So if we look here, we see compartments like the Golgi apparatus, the ER, mitochondria, and lysosomes, etc. All of these compartments are made up of membranes, and all of these membranes increase surface area on the inside of the cell for reactions to occur. And not only do they do that, but they also there are specialized regions for very specific reactions to occur as well. So compartmentalization also increases surface area to volume ratio and solves that problem of low surface area to volume ratio. So having membranous organelles inside of the cell, so having more membranes on the inside of the cell, increases the surface area to volume ratio. Now, let's see what happens as cells get larger. One thing that they can do is instead of having one large cell that fills up a particular volume, what happens if that cell is made up of an equal number of much smaller cells? So say, for example, we have a cell and each side is 1 micrometer. The length, the breadth, and the height is 1 micrometer. And it grows into a single cell, which is 5 micrometer in length, breadth, and height. When we look at the surface area to volume ratio, we realize that it decreases from 6 to 1.2. However, if it is this volume now, instead of it being one large cell, it is now, this volume is now made up of a number of smaller cells. In this case, it will be made up of 5 by 5 by 5, which is 125 smaller cells, each with its own surface area of 6 sides. What it is we realize is that the total surface area is now 750. Its volume remains 125, which is the same as this cube here. And the surface area to volume ratio is 6:1, which means that it's 6 times as large well, almost 6 times as large as what it would have been if it was only a single cell, which is 1.2, right? So multicellularity is a way which allows for cells to overcome the challenge of lower surface area to volume ratio. So instead of having one big cell, an organism made up of a lot of smaller cells will have a much higher surface area to volume ratio. So let us conclude. So today we would have learned that cellular growth brings challenges to survival. One consequence of becoming larger is decreased surface area to volume ratio. Cells have overcome these issues by evolving innovative solutions such as microvilli, compartmentalization, and becoming multicellular. Here are some other resources that you might be able to access that might expand the knowledge on this topic for you. I hope that you learned something today and you have a pleasant evening.